crazy in all
Something.
kinds of ways.
Yes.
I'm not sure we're prepared, but we're going to start anyway.
I don't know. I really don't know what this is going to be.
This could spiral out of control, or it could be very boring for people. I really don't know how this is going to go.
I'm not sure. I'm happy to do it, as always.
Yeah. Anyway, welcome back to the Hack Fraud Show, everybody. We have finally arrived at the 100th episode, the grand finale of Volume 2 of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We're
very professional here.
We're once again taking this opportunity to look back and reflect on the last year or so of movie watching for this podcast.
Yeah, and also sometimes these things where like we kind of go back and look at movies and see how our opinions have changed, because like sometimes it takes a while to like digest a movie.
Certainly.
And I think that's part of why we chose some of the movies we did on this bracket.
Yeah, it's going to be. We have assembled a bracket. Actually, Garrett, you kind of put the whole bracket together. I think maybe you should explain it.
Okay, so how this worked is that I was sent a really goddamn long list of movies. And then I made an original bracket, and then everyone's like, no, this is too fucking long.
Well, it was like 100
here for 8 hours.
Or something like that.
Yes, we will be here for 8 hours. Let's not do that. So I'm like, okay. So then we reduced it down to a bracket of 16. And as you, dear audience, will figure out soon, there are some matches that could make or break this podcast. So
yeah, I can't see anything on here that would break the podcast. There's some things that might cause rifts.
Well, certainly.
Yeah, there's.
I don't think the fountain is going anywhere. If you
there are going to be some things out here that we're going to argue about. I think that.
Shall I read off the Do you want me to read off?
Let's wait on that. We'll get there in a moment.
We'll sort of see when it comes about.
I just Rita, I honestly, you did an excellent job with this. I think there's a lot of good stuff here that we're going to kind of get into it about.
Yeah.
I'm
actually kind of impressed by like how balanced this is, because there's some really tough choices on here.
It's gonna be something. We're gonna get into that shortly. I think we're going to save what we've been watching and maybe see if we have time at the end, because we're really not sure how long this is going to take. But we have all assembled, much like we did last year, our kind of our personal top 5 movies that we watched for the podcast. We're going to kind of run them down fairly quickly before we get to the bracket here.
Especially, we're probably going to talk about some of them already.
Yeah, that's true. So, who wants to start rattling? Should we like alternate, or do you just want to go through each of our lists individually?
I kind of want to go alternate.
Sure.
All right, that's fine by me.
Okay, we'll alternate. Fun. All right, Garrett, what's your number 5?
Okay, I'm just gonna say it because we don't have time.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. My number 5 was Kieslowski's Three Colors Blue.
Ooh.
Oh, you only chose one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
If I may ask, why this over the other 3 colors?
It was the prettiest and had greater thematic resonance. And it's probably the best one out of the 3.
I'm not sure I believe the latter, but I think blue is sort of the most put together of them. It's also kind of the most centralized of all of them.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of helps when you're dealing with a film series that can be just like very broad, and sometimes it gets very political in very interesting ways. So sometimes like that central holding factor of like woman with depression learning to deal with depression, that's really powerful.
And then also the quite serious but also quite hilarious sequences when I believe Julia, that's...
Oh, what is her name? I don't know. Juliette Binoche. Yeah.
Yeah. Goes, no, and then it cuts to black with dramatic music.
Yeah.
And then it's slowly back in the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do love that.
I think, is blue the prettiest?
It is. Maybe, yeah. I think there's a lot of really kind of elliptical imagery in there that works really well for the movie.
Yeah.
I kind of lean more towards red. I think that's my favorite of the three, and I think it's the best. But
honestly, I think white might be my favorite.
Okay, interesting. So we kind of run the gamut here.
I can't quite say it's the best constructed of any of them, but I think just like pure enjoyment, I think white's my favorite because I think it's the most batshit crazy. It's the one that shows us the most locations and so forth. I think it's the most political of any of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Sure.
And it also kind of articulates the Kieslowskian sort of like East meets West mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, what was your number 5?
My number 5, I sort of said this in the run-up before we started recording, but I think one of the greatest things this podcast has ever done for me is like introduce me to Kurosawa in a way I wouldn't have before. Because it's possible that I would have seen like 1 or 2 of them. I think the sheer number of Kurosawa films I've seen is due to this podcast and this podcast alone. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's quite meaningful to have a Kurosawa movie on my top 5. And for this, it's kind of difficult which one you choose, but I think I just sort of chose the one I enjoyed the most, and that's Throne of Blood.
Ah, yes.
I goddamn loved Throne of Blood. I thought it was gorgeous. I loved its visual use of nature. I fucking adore the scene where it's just a one shot that just stays on the wife in like it's not really a throne room or something of the sort.
Yeah, they're kind of central hall where they kind of
they're
reside.
Just kind of like little. I think it's like a bedroom or something of the sort, and it just stays with her as like. I don't think there's music either.
I don't think so. I think it's all kind of silent to a certain degree.
Yeah, and Mishune comes back with crazy eyes, like saying like, you know exactly what he's done, and that is one of the most powerful like sequences in cinema I have ever seen.
Yeah.
And there's just also like that movie also just has this wonderful, wonderful climax where Mishune just starts getting shot at with arrows and just starts screaming.
Yeah.
I think it has some of the greatest like fireworks of Kurosawa's career, and I think it's just watchable from beginning to end, and also just like just a wonderful political tale, like the best of Kurosawa's work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Kurosawa is a director that he's on whatever my kind of director Mount Rushmore is. Like, I think Rashomon has only grown in my mind, like, since I saw it those first couple times, and this was the year I finally watched Seven Samurai, lest we forget.
Samurai,
and
I think Ran is wonderful.
Ran was incredible.
I think he is the greatest Japanese director. Can we agree on that? I always have a soft spot for Miyazaki, but
yeah, I mean he's certainly, if not the greatest, like, he's number 2. I think there's total consensus on that. He is a master.
He's certainly the best live action.
Yeah.
We could say that.
Yeah. Well,
that's my number 5, Tyler.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's interesting we bring this up because I'm going to kind of continue this thread to a certain degree because my number 5 is from a non-live action Japanese director. That would be Satoshi Kon's Paprika.
Paprika, yes.
Which I just, God, that movie.
It's delightful.
It's delightful, but it's just cuckoo bananas in the best possible way, where it's just like throwing all kinds of shit at you without necessarily explaining it all at once, and you're just kind of.
You too.
The visuals of that movie are incredible.
It's incredible. I mean, I think about that kind of whole sequence where we kind of zoom in on the one character's face and she turns into the titular Paprika and kind of zooms away from the camera and then falls
I always think of the scene
through the sky.
We have Paprika, and I can't remember what his name is, but like he was once like an amateur filmmaker, and he's explaining filmmaking terms and explaining films to her.
Yeah.
And then like the parade starts coming into the theater, and it is just so surreal and wonderful, and like it's full of creativity, but a kind of creativity that is also just full of thematic richness.
Yeah.
It's not just like weird nonsense coming at the screen.
Yeah, no, it deals a lot with, kind of ideas of, childhood and moving on from childhood and, like, dealing with past trauma and, dreams and how we, view ourselves and all that stuff. And
it's very humanist with technology.
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah. And I think that those kinds of stories are stories that we kind of need more and more these days.
I think the lazy way to say it's its Inception if Inception was actually good.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I still think Inception holds many pleasures, but we'll talk about that later.
We'll get to that.
All right. Reed, what is your number 4 pick?
Okay, well, to save time, because we already discussed this, my number 4 was Satoshi Kon's Paprika.
Oh boy.
Well, is there anything like unique from Tyler's reasoning that you put it on there?
The images in this movie are just batshit nuts, and it really sticks with you. It sticks in your craw.
But it's the sort of thing, like, it also must be known that there's always, like, the best directors know how to do this. There's always a focal point on frame.
Yes.
Like, even when, like, the frame is just the most cluttered and, like, insane thing you've ever seen, they're still like, okay, I'm supposed to pay attention to this. I'm supposed to see this. And, like, when you're dealing with the kind of imagery that this movie does, that's really admirable, and that's really worth pointing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, because this goes from, like, a very well-contained scene. It's like, oh, doctor's clinic in the beginning, like, it captivates your attention. But, like, it captivates your attention just as much as, like, the final duel at the end.
Yeah. But that doctor sequence also has a moment where he just jumps out a window, and it goes batshit crazy.
That's right.
And I love that movie. I think it must be known that I think the only reason Paprika is not in my top 5 is because I recommended it to this podcast. I had seen it before.
Yeah. I still have not gone back and watched his other movie, Perfect Blue, which I know I need to do.
I actually haven't seen Perfect Blue.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
I haven't seen, so maybe that's podcast material. Who knows?
Ooh, that could be.
Do you want to move on to me, or?
Yes, let's hear your number 4.
John, what's your number 4?
More movies we've already talked about, the Three Colors trilogy. And I sort of opted to combine it into one movie because, like, I would have to tell myself, do I like blue better than white?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to do that, so I just kind of want to say this. And, like, this was also just, like, a really rich... Watching these movies one after the other is actually, like, really rich and rewarding in a way that, like kind of binge watching isn't really.
Yeah.
Like, binge watching can often be just exhausting and mind-numbing, but this, like, really, sometimes, like, putting these next to each other helps, like, it helps you, like, unearth thematic depth that you might not realize if you just kind of watch these things as self-contained units. Like, I watched Blue as a self-contained unit, and it means so much more now, having watched White and Red.
Yeah.
And it also, I'm actually not as fond of Red as the other ones, but I still think Red is still, like, a really rich and wonderful experience to watch. Mm-hmm. But I think White is still my favorite. Like, I think White's the one I had the most memories of, and I always remember. And I think I just adore the scene of, like, the man saying "shoot me."
Yeah.
To Carol.
Yeah.
And, like, and then I think, doesn't he shoot a blank or just refuses to shoot him?
He shoots a blank, yeah.
It's a blank, and there's just that scene, like, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I don't want to die, and that's just, like, a wonderful little moment in what is a pretty crazy film at times.
It is pretty crazy at times, yes. I mean...
Yeah, and the fact that, like, this movie is able to slow down enough to have that scene, I think that speaks wonders to, like, the kind of Nostromo that Kieslowski is.
Yeah, he is, he never loses the human touch, even in the craziest or strangest moments, and I think, much like you said, the only reason these are not on my top 5 is because I had seen them prior to the podcast, and I honestly think, like, the Three Colors are my favorite foreign films. They're just so incredible in so many ways, and just a masterpiece of, art film construction. And I
think it's the best trilogy of all time. I think that's, like, very much worth saying.
It's up there for sure.
Especially like art house trilogies just aren't a thing that exists very often.
Well, they sort of do in that, like, people tend to group together, like, similarly themed films from foreign directors as quote-unquote trilogies. I think
that's kind of like us doing auteur theory and saying, like, oh, these are true, like, Scorsese films, something like that. Like, we lump together, like, Wolf of Wall Street and, like, Goodfellas, like, sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's just an exercise we just need to stop. Regardless, this is one of the greatest, like, film trilogies ever made by, I think, the greatest Polish filmmaker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much of a frame of reference there, but
Yeah.
sure, I'm prepared to say that.
Sure.
But anyway, Tyler,
Yeah.
what's your number 4?
Well, my number 4 is another film that we watched it relatively recently, I think, compared to some of the other ones on here. But this is Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
I will fucking always remember the scene where like I can't remember the woman's name is, but they're in the little, I think it's like a little like tea house or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And some people come and harass her, and she just fucking destroys the tea house in the process of kicking these guys' asses in just insanely choreographed tightrope action scenes.
This movie is just one incredible action scene after the other.
Oh yeah.
And yet the characters are all so rich, and like the history of them is just, you feel the history of all these people, and again, the movie's just gorgeous. The fight scenes are all beautifully staged. There's some incredible ingenuity to all of the fight scenes and the wire work, and it really blew me away. This movie,
great characters.
Such great characters. It really, I just, you think like this movie could so easily get by on just pure like visceral pleasures.
Yeah, but you have like the fascinating scene where they're in Manchuria.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like that fascinating like cave that fascinating cave scene at the end.
Yeah. And yeah, just that like 20-minute digression where it's like a flashback to kind of the lead female character and her lover of sorts. This movie I was entranced by it, and I think it's one I'm going to return to a lot in the future.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. And I'd love to do more Ang Lee in the future.
Yeah, we really need to get around to Brokeback Mountain.
Brokeback Mountain. I hear the Ice Storm is incredible.
I've heard good things about that too. We'll get back to him soon, I hope. Reed, number 3.
Okay, so my number 3 was a movie I've seen rather recently, an Archer epic that sometimes didn't feel like an epic, but sometimes did. But that doesn't matter, because it was quite delightful. And of course, those in the audience that are counting, this is 1943's Powell and Pressburger movie, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Which Reed watched he finished it mere moments before we started doing this podcast today. But
you mocked my mustache, but you don't know why I grew it.
Reed, I'm
just belly, but you don't know how I got it.
I'm so glad that you elected to view this movie before doing this.
That first sauna scene's incredible.
Oh yeah, the sauna scene. That is like, I think that is one of the greatest sort of like old defense of the old guard I have ever seen on film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like this 70-year-old man just wailing at a lieutenant. in a bathhouse built from the 1900s.
Oh my goodness!
It's incredible. God, what's there to say about this movie?
I mean,
probably one of the more endearing parts of this movie is the relationship between Teo and General Candy. Probably their enduring relationship dynamic throughout the years is incredibly charming.
Yeah, that between the Anton Walbrook character and Clive Candy.
Also, I think this is the best Anton Walbrook performance.
Certainly.
Even with the red shoes.
Yeah, and well, I mean, he's great in both of them. But yeah, no, you can't match. I mean, that speech that he gives, at the beginning of the World War II portion of the movie is.
He articulates like why I fled the Nazis for 1943. I don't know how you get a scene like that made.
Yeah. No, that is etched in my memory forever, and this movie just truly was one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen.
Yeah. It also has there's a moment, I think we used this as the thumbnail for the video, but the scene where we just have Candy as a World War I soldier just set against this apocalyptic background.
Yeah.
And just kind of, he seems so sure of himself, but he is so utterly lost in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
is this the last shot?
It's not the last shot, no. The last shot of the movie, I think, is them in front of, what used to be the apartment, but is now just, a reflecting pool.
Yeah.
The floods.
The floods. And this is during the World War One portion. We just I think a car breaks down or something of that variety, and he's just sitting there, just in the background. It's just like this World War One.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And like that is etched in my memory. Like so is got another great Anton Walbrook scenes where he brings Anton Walbrook to like a dinner with a bunch of like British aristocrats. That's incredible. I think we can't say enough about. I hope like our articulation about this movie isn't just like these scenes are incredible.
Yeah, no, it has an incredible like thematic clarity about its characters and about like the changing nature of war and of society. And
and of the Europe it's portraying. I think there's something quite transnational about the film in a really interesting way. Is that I don't think it's accurate to say this is a thoroughly British film, even though it has mostly British characters and takes place in England.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like large stretches where we're in the fields of France and in Germany, in Berlin for a duel at the Café Hohenzollern, and those sequences are wonderful. And I think it just portrays. I think it is one of the greatest. It's one of the greatest World War II movies, one of the greatest World War I movies.
It's one of the greatest early 1900s movies.
Yeah, it is such a command over its time periods, and also just. Candy is just one of the greatest like film presence like you can have on screen. Just a character of great depth and great emotion, but it's also just super charming and super wonderful to be around the entire time.
And definitely what makes sort of like the last third of the movie interesting is that he is quite so a gentleman fighting in a Nazi war.
Yes, and how it both is sympathetic for like the plight of like the old guard, yet is also very much like the old guard's gone and there's nothing he can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that is tragic and poignant in a really concrete way, and I can't really think of another movie that kind of masters that as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's just one of the greatest movies ever made. Just
it's a miracle that was created when it was, and I think it's a tragedy that's not talked about more.
Yeah. Well, why don't people talk about Powell and Pressburger more? They're one of the great.
Because they're idiots. People want to fucking talk about Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. All right, Jono, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Exit Through the Gift Shop.
Yeah.
Artsy.
This is just an incredible documentary about art, about the culture we build around art, and also just about commodities, about how art is a commodity, and I don't think it's really a Marxist film per se, because it never comes out and says like art is a commodity, therefore it is no longer art. I don't think the movie quite goes to the idea that like God, what's his? I can't remember his name. Isn't it like Mr. Brainwash?
Yes, Mr. Brainwash.
Is what Terry's name is.
Yeah.
He never goes on the side of Mr. Brainwash is invalid art. It is not art, but it's also deeply cynical about Terry, about his rise to being a quite wealthy and successful artist through pretty much almost plagiarism.
Yeah.
And I think it is such clear-eyed about its subject matter. And I think we talked about Banksy a bit in like an original review, and how like we weren't quite sure what to think of him at the beginning, but Banksy is such a perfect vehicle to drive this. So it's a perfect point of view, because he is one of those figures who can greatly articulate street art in a way that the other artists we see can't. Even because sometimes like street art is just like, I put Space Invader up on this because wouldn't that be cute?
Yeah.
And like and like how that contrast between what Terry's doing and how is that different from what Terry's doing. And I think this is just one of the greatest like art documentaries ever made, and I think everyone should see it if they have any passing interest in like the idea of what is art.
Yeah.
And especially like I have conversations about what is art, mostly around propaganda. But especially because like we live in a world where Battleship Potemkin is called one of the greatest films ever made, and like there's a lot of questions about what gets to be called art, especially in the internet age where like anyone can do anything.
Yeah.
So, and I think like this movie has just become more and more relevant as as the years have gone by, and I think it continued to be relevant because I think it is such a masterpiece.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. Yeah, this movie was really a powerhouse in so many ways, and
also just like wildly entertaining and just wildly thrilling from end to end. The pacing is wonderful. Terry is such a fascinating enigma to hang the movie on. I can't sing its praising enough. I think it's one of the greatest documentaries ever made.
Yeah, certainly one of the best that I've seen, though I have a somewhat limited window in that regard.
I used to before my documentary film class. So
yeah.
Thank you, Professor Levin.
Alrighty. So, my number 3 here is a movie that, I don't know that I've talked about it a whole lot kind of since we watched it, but it's one that's really stuck in my mind, and I think about it a lot, and I just think it was so incredibly written and so incredibly put together, and this is Billy Wilder's The Apartment.
Oh, yeah, that movie's incredible.
The construction of it is so brilliant. I mean, you have Jack Lemmon, doing incredible work. Like maybe
doing incredible work. Oh God, who plays the suicidal woman?
Oh, that's Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley MacLaine. That is one of the most fascinating characters I've ever seen in a '60s film.
She is fantastic, and I think that I've seen some stuff where they kind of, somewhat dismiss her character as sort of a manic pixie dream girl kind of archetype, but I think quite the opposite. Like, there's a lot of kind of psychological depth to her, and she, she gives the movie an interesting energy. And really,
the thing about the manic pixie dream girl I don't want to go to is the idea that they're more of a cipher for like if she were truly a manic pixie dream, she would be a cipher for Jack Lemmon's development. And if anything, I think it's quite the opposite. I think Jack Lemmon gains personality through a personality like that.
And she develops as a character like through her relationship with Jack Lemmon. Like it's such an incredible like just kind of two-hander. Like the back half of the movie kind of focuses on them kind of coexisting together, like as she's recovering from her suicide attempt, and
that's a really just fascinating relationship on screen.
Yeah, no, I love this movie so much.
Yeah, in a way that you just don't see from this era because of this idea. Because honestly, this is kind of before the sexual revolution as well.
Yeah.
So a character like this is actually quite revolutionary.
No, it's a very daring movie for the time, and it takes a lot of risks that all, in my opinion, pay off, and I just think this movie's a real masterpiece.
Yeah, it's also kind of shocking in some ways.
Yeah.
In a way that is something that like many movies just can't be, even if they attempt to be shocking.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, there's little more shocking than seeing kind of transgressive content in like a kind of classical sort of era styled Hollywood movie. That gives things a genuine kind of weird edge to them, and it works really well for this movie.
Yeah. I think that's part of why people love Sunset Boulevard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
sort
for
of like a classic Hollywood edge to describe it. But yeah, I'm super glad you brought up The Apartment because that movie is a masterpiece.
Yeah. Reed, number 2.
Okay, so this one was also a bit of a recent watch, and since we've watched this, talked about this on the podcast, it's stuck with me. Quite so. This movie's full of color. This is full of charm. It's a strongly resonating message. And for those counting in the audience, this is Spike Lee's 1989 comedy drama film, Do the Right Thing.
It is. I think this is kind of like the black cinema movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of it as far as like when we're trying to track like what black film is, and I think there's quite a few like I think like the resonant the waves this made in black cinema can still be seen today.
Just the waves it made in cinema in general. I mean, it's a powerhouse of filmmaking and just I mean this Spike Lee just brought an incredible vision to this movie, an incredible eye. an incredible humanist touch. All the characters just feel so rich and so three-dimensional, and
Yeah, it's just a great world building exercise. Like
Mhm.
this
Almost certainly.
feels so lived in and so bright, and well, not so much bright, but colorful in a very interesting, nuanced way.
yeah. Do you have anything else to say, Garrett?
It speaks for itself
Yeah.
if you go and watch
Yeah,
it.
I don't want to speak too much about it because we very recently did an episode on it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's also true.
But yeah, this is a masterpiece, and I think like if you have if you need to start with black cinema, this is it.
Mhm.
Because black cinema and protest cinema in general can be quite daunting,
Sure.
and I think this is just a very nuanced and very watchable.
Yeah.
place to
Incredibly
start.
watchable. Yeah.
John, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is The Fly. The Fly. The Fly. I think this is one of the great. I think this is one of my new favorite horror films, but it's also just a great sort of like comedy of errors in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is it's this like pitch black comedy of Jeff Goldblum who gets turned into a fly, just like trying to like deal with what is in essence an illness, but very strange illness.
Yeah.
Trying to accommodate it, trying to deal with it, trying to have relationships despite it, and utterly failing, and becoming quite a literal monster in the process.
Right.
And like Jeff Goldblum lends it such like a human touch. Like it is very easy to read this character as like, oh, this is just a monster. I'm going to be monstrous. But Jeff Goldblum lends it such a human touch that that character becomes extraordinarily fascinating, and also the effects are some of the greatest ever put into a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fly transformation scene is one of those iconic things in cinema that I don't think you can do anymore because they would just CGI it.
Right.
And you just can't get like once you see that, you just can't unsee that, and that's one of the greatest assets of such a horror movie.
Work. It will never be touched.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of a tragedy in some ways. Like this is kind of a last gasp for cinema because because the horror comedy really isn't like this anymore.
Yeah.
The horror comedy is something very different now.
Well,
as well as like so are the effects and like how we pace these things, like how it's advertised, how the acting is.
Yeah. Well,
the acting's almost vaudevillian at times, and that's actually kind of wonderful.
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting the way that Cronenberg kind of mines the horror for comedy, like, rather than just kind of melding the two together.
There's the point where, like, he has to, like, spit up his food like a fly does.
Yeah.
And, like, that scene is, like, you're not quite... In one way, it's, like, it's quite disgusting, but in another way, it's very well-paced, and Goldblum has wonderful comedic timing, so it's quite funny. And also, it is just... I think it is, like, a wonderful character study. It's also, of course, like, read into it whatever ideas of scientific hubris you want out of it.
Sure.
And
none.
So
okay.
If anything, I think it can make actually a pretty decent Silicon Valley movie. But that's beside the point. But yeah, I think it is one of the great. I think it's one of the great horror films. I think it's my favorite Cronenberg, and I think it is just the absolute masterpiece on just about everything it tries.
Yeah,
I think it's just a wild ride from beginning to end, and I can't place that down.
Yeah, it's a riotously good time, and also just horrifying.
oh yeah, but horrifying in a very entertaining way.
Certainly,
like in some ways, like I think even like The Thing doesn't quite match that.
Mm.
Very true.
So my number 2, in contrast to The Apartment, this is a movie I talk about over and over again, and it's one that I bring up a lot. And if you were to ask me now what my favorite Scorsese movie is, I think, if I were to be honest, I would say Goodfellas, but I think that this is the answer I'm going to give in interviews to seem more interesting. This is Martin Scorsese's riotous masterpiece, After Hours.
Yeah, I think we sort of say like what we sort of argue about like what Scorsese's best like New York movie is, because like we can it's very easy to call him a New York director, but he didn't make that many like quote unquote New York films.
He's made his fair share. I think a lot of his movies tend to be centralized around New York in a way.
But like strictly like we have Mean Streets, we have Taxi Driver, and then there's there's Bringing Out the Dead and After Hours, and he hasn't really approached the New York movie in a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting, and also, yeah, After Hours is just a riotous time from beginning to end. It starts with a bang, and that bang continues all the way to the end, where we just like it has one of my favorite endings of all time, where he's just like thrown out onto the street, like covered in plaster, and just goes back to work.
Right back where it began. I just think this movie it's one of those movies where every new scene is just a wondrous, like, treasure trove to discover. Like, every scene is wondrous and I would say iconic, but this movie is criminally underknown, I think. And
I mean, like, I can't forget the scene where like he goes to the man who kind of wants to have sex with him, but like he just starts ranting and raving and more raving until he's just like, okay, I'm bored.
Right. Yeah, there's so many just wondrous, surreal touches in this movie.
Yeah.
The design of it is incredible. It makes New York into just this absurdist nightmare in a way that like so few movies, if any other movies, have done.
If anything, it's kind of like a distant cousin to like Do the Right Thing, as it is like a world building exercise for a place that already exists and has a very distinct vision of for many people, and utterly undermines it to create its own universe.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
It's there's so much to be mined in this movie, and I haven't gone back to it since we watched it, and I would want to. I think I'm going to rewatch it sometime soon. Because it's just incredible.
I actually think I like Bringing Out the Dead a bit better, but I think like After Hours is like a riotous time from the beginning to end. I think you could argue it's the better constructed movie.
Yeah, I think so. So that's that. Garrett, what's your number one?
Okay. Well,
favorite movie of Volume 2.
All right, my number one. Okay, so this movie was the second, not the first adaptation, but the second adaptation of George Langeland's short story, which also has the same title as this film. And it definitely feels very tight narrative. It definitely goes places from beginning to end. Very good character arcs, and then very much devolution that would master Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. And we've already discussed this movie actually, but I'm talking about David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Yeah, The Fly is. I think. The Metamorphosis is a very good comparison for this. Like, a very like strange, like extra comedic, because Kafka's already kind of dark comedy. This is even more like extra comedic. Yeah,
very much so. With Kafka, you don't get so much like the evolution of turning into, a terrifying insect. Yeah. Because you start that from the start.
I don't think Kafka ever started body horror either. I think Kafka is always about like that existential dread. Though I'd argue like through body horror, Cronenberg kind of captures that.
Yeah, with Kafka, you mainly get a bunch of like relationships with like family and whatnot. But like Cronenberg focuses on that mainly towards the end, but also details of the sheer horror of that, especially in the final scene, which
masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of a horror scene.
Yeah,
masterpiece.
Wow. Do you have anything else to add other than like I've already like gushed over this movie, and I completely agree with everything you're saying.
Well, in 2008, Howard Shore apparently made an opera of The Fly. I don't want to ever see that.
I have questions.
Yeah. How? I don't know.
Sign me up. I'm there.
So, yeah, that's my top 5 list.
Nice.
So John, what's your? I think I know what your number one is. I just want to hear it.
You mock my top 5 list, but you don't know why I created it. You mock my defense of the Fountain, but you don't know why I like it. It's the life and death of Colonel Blimp, motherfucker.
Yeah, that's my number one too.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
It's one of the best films ever made. I mean, like, in some ways, I want to throw a curveball at this podcast and be like, no, it's not the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, but I couldn't find anything.
I can't pretend it's not. This is my favorite movie that we've done for the podcast, and it stands so head and shoulders above like most other movies that I've seen. I
think just must be known that, like, Reed, you texted me about color film beforehand, and color film's been around pretty much since the advent of film.
Okay.
But I think it must be known that, like, the Archers master Technicolor in a way that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
Like, how they are able to meld sort of, like, the dark shadows of noir, but, like, the bright sort of, like, almost like Wizard of Oz, like, imagery.
Yeah.
It's just utterly fascinating and utterly just haunting to watch. And I think, like, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is one of the most gorgeous films ever made. Mm-hmm. And I think it also must be known that General John Wynne Candy is one of the most fascinating characters ever put to screen. I think I can never forget the dueling scene where they sit around the table and be like, okay, how is this duel going to go? Okay, yes, we're going to have this, and this. Oh, we have some representatives of the imperial government with us. What are we going to do? And the duel as, like, this paradoxically barbaric yet civilized thing. Uh-huh. And I think that's, like, and the film is consistently mining that for what it's worth. And I think it's just utterly fascinating. And Tyler, I want you to take the wheel.
No, I mean, you've said it all, and we could gush about this movie for ages. Yeah. And I just think that, yeah, just one of the most incredible movies ever made about war, about aging, about, and just the way they bring the human touch to all these movies that at times have just very strange premises. And
yeah, like A Matter of Life and Death.
A Matter of Life and Death, another incredible movie. I mean,
yeah, a movie that, like, should not work in any way, yet is one of the most incredible films I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this movie for me also kind of just stands in for, like, the filmography of Powell and Pressburger at large, which I think is one of, the most valued things that I've taken from doing this podcast, is being introduced to that.
That is, like, the discovery for us on this podcast at this point, is finding those people and finding just, like, what an incredible treasure trove of classic Hollywood filmmaking it is.
Yeah. So, that about wraps it up for our top fives, and I think it's about time we get into this bracket.
Do the honors?
Yes.
You shall do the honors.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the 2018 Hack Front Show Volume 2 finale cinematic clusterfuck. Let me introduce you to the two conferences, if you will. So we're going to call this the left conference because it's on the left side of the page. All right, we have our number 1 seed, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, facing off against number 8 seed, The Fountain.
Continue.
Okay, all right, and then we have number 4 seed, Persona, facing off against number 5 seed, Paprika.
All right.
Okay, and we have number 3 seed, After Hours, facing off against number 6 seed, Time Bandits.
Wonderful.
And then we have the number 2 seed, the entire Three Colors trilogy, facing off against the Clockwork Orange-esque, but not quite that film, and number 7 seed, Naked.
Mike Lee's Naked. Jesus.
We're gonna get to that.
All right, and then in the right conference, since it's on the right side of the page, we have the number 1 seed, The Fly, facing off against number 8 seed, Inception. Okay. And then we have number 4 seed, The Red Shoes, facing off against number 5 seed, Big Trouble in Little China.
Love it.
Okay. And then we have number 3 seed, Exit Through the Gift Shop, facing off against number 6, Branded to Kill. Okay, and then lastly we have number 2 seed, The Thing, facing off against number 7, Dogtooth.
Oh boy.
Who was that by again? I don't remember.
Yorgos Lanthimos.
Lanthimos, yeah, and that's a movie.
It's quite a movie.
So where do we want to start?
Let's start let's just get the easy one out of the way. All right, number 1 seed, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp versus number 8 seed, The Fountain.
All
What
right.
do we think, boys?
Let's go. Of course, it's the life and death of Colonel Blimp. I'm not mad.
Okay, I mean, this is a kind of a foregone conclusion, but I think we want to talk about these things a little bit. John, stick up for the merits of The Fountain a little bit here.
The Fountain, I think it is visually gorgeous. I don't care what you think. I mean, of course, like some scenes just don't hold up at all. I don't hold this up as a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I also think there are just like fascinating things about. Let me sort of articulate something here, because I do think that there is merits in like this film's kind of like quasi circular structure.
Uh-huh.
I'd say it's more trilinear, but okay.
That's a way to put it. I think the movie thinks it's circular.
Oops.
But like I think it does have like fascinating things to have about like concurrent events and time and ripples and reoccurrences and things of that sort. Like how how fucking Hugh Jackman will repeat phrases in different scenarios. I think is a really interesting cinematic choice.
Yeah.
I think I do like Hugh Jackman. He's terrible in some scenes, I'll give you that. But I do like Hugh Jackman in certain scenes. I'm not going to say like this is a masterpiece in any way.
Hugh Jackman.
And if anything, like my stock on it is only decreased since we saw it. But I do think there is merit in this movie, and I did found it like a fairly rewarding, maybe not rewarding, but a rich watch. I think it was something. I think it is something that has a very unique atmosphere. And something that did just kind of wash over me and kind of left me in a trance until I finally actually thought about it.
I've certainly never seen anything like it. I will say that.
That's one way to put it.
I will say Hugh Jackman is struggling valiantly to do something interesting here and failing, but
he has an interesting face. What can we say?
I don't want to dismiss this movie completely because I don't think it has no merits, but it's pretty horrendous.
It's not great. That's for sure.
I'm not saying it's a great movie. I'm just saying it's a valid movie.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, that is some of the greatest damning of fine praise on my end.
All right, so I think The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp takes that in a sweep.
In spades.
But this next matchup should prove somewhat interesting.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
Ingmar Bergman's Persona up against Satoshi Kon's Paprika.
Yeah, I don't think Persona is as confusing as you think it is, because I do think like the two-hander that they hang it on is really compelling and super interesting in a non-allegorical way.
Yeah, I don't see this movie as an allegory really, and I don't know if it's. I wouldn't say it's confusing so much as just kind of confounding. I mean, the central.
Yeah. I don't know what the jump scare cock means. I'm not gonna. I don't know what that. I'm not gonna stand for that. I'm just saying that was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, the central through line of it is the kind of the melding of these two women and kind of maybe like them becoming each other. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of, interesting stuff in the movie, but I also think that maybe it doesn't contain as many multitudes as the critical community seems to think it does. But I don't know, is the thing. I would have to watch this movie a couple more times, maybe, before I can really make a definitive statement about it.
Yeah. I think it is really rich and warning. I think there is quite a lot to this relationship that we hang the movie on. And especially like when one woman attempts to escape it and can't. And what that means, I think there is quite a lot of value in this, and there's also quite a bit of like when was Persona made again?
1960 something.
Yeah, 1960 something. This is a movie in the middle of the sexual revolution that has like a very vivid description of sexual activity in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and I think that is really fascinating. Also, that scene is just utterly fascinating to watch. So like I think Persona is utterly fascinating. That being said, I still like Paprika more.
Yeah, does it hold a candle to the wondrous, surreal, and delightful and multifaceted imagery of Paprika?
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does
No.
either. The pleasures of Paprika for me far outweigh the meditative confoundingness of Persona.
Oh yeah. If I were like this shit to tell it like, hey Brenda, do you want to watch Paprika or Persona? You want to watch Paprika? Sure. Exactly.
Sounds spicy.
That's the worst joke we've ever had on this podcast, and I'm proud of it.
No, it's not.
Because then there's my material.
Oh, I forgot Blue Dong exists.
Lest we forget the age of the Blue Dong, we're not going to talk about that. All right, so Paprika's moving on. Sorry, Ingmar Bergman. We tried.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, this should be an interesting matchup because these movies are kind of similar in some ways. They're really not that much alike, but they do share a kind of off-kilter.
Similar tone.
They share an off-kilter tone, and kind of an anything goes kind of mentality. This is
one's like a Martin Scorsese New York movie. The other is an acid trip that still remains the strangest movie I've ever seen.
Yes, we are talking about Martin Scorsese's After Hours going up against Time Bandits by who's
Terry Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam.
I think this is actually a pretty easy choice for me to go with After Hours, but I'm curious what you guys have to say. Especially I think you, Tyler, you really love Time Bandits.
I did like Time Bandits. I like Time Bandits quite a bit. It was very delightful. I do think I'm picking After Hours because I thought that movie is just an incredible ride. Time Bandits has a great cuckoo sensibility, and there's so much in that movie that I do really enjoy. But
the imagery of it is just unmatchable. Yeah,
but it does frequently kind of slow down and just kind of sometimes come to a screeching halt. The Napoleon sequence goes on a little too long. That whole part with him and Sean Connery in ancient Greece. Yeah. I do like it, but it is kind of, it loses me a little. But that is not to
the idea of let's do anything just makes it kind of like an unfocused mess at times.
At times, yeah.
I kind of felt like that was sort of the thing with After Hours a little bit.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that?
Because about halfway through After Hours, you sort of get the sense of, okay, we're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. When can we get a resolution? When can this... there was a bit of fatigue. There was certainly fatigue in watching this.
I think it must be known that both of these movies are movies where no resolution is kind of the point.
Yeah.
But I think After Hours makes that far more succinctly because because it's not a kids movie.
Mm-hmm.
Time Bandits is a kids movie, and it's structured kind of like a kids movie.
Are we sure?
Are we sure? It is. I think it is. I don't know about this either, but when you get to the ending, your first thought is, "What the fuck did I just watch?" Whereas you don't quite get that same thing with After Hours.
Well, Time Bandits has kind of that neat little Grimm's fairy tale edge to it, where it doesn't end happily for everybody, and it leaves you on a very strange note, and I don't know, I do appreciate that.
I don't think that's a bug. I'm just saying how it's presented is a bug. It is my general thing about it, because I think Time Bandits just kind of needs us to shed a little bit more of the we're kind of a normal kids movie, because I think the way it presents itself is we're a kids movie, we're doing kids movie things.
Yeah.
When what it's actually doing is putting me through an acid trip, and I like that acid trip, but sometimes I just generally don't know what Time Bandits wants from me, and not so much in a way of I'm not quite sure what to think of it, which I would usually say is not a pejorative, but in a way where I don't know what the movie even wants to attempt with me.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah.
But still, I still really like Time Bandits. It's still wildly entertaining.
Yeah.
I just don't think it quite holds a candle to After Hours.
Yeah, I think After Hours I would classify as one of Scorsese's masterpieces, and Time Bandits just doesn't quite get there for me. So I think. Well, sorry, Reed, you're outvoted.
You actually want to vote for Time Bandits?
Yeah.
There you go. It's
so it's 2-1. But
me and Tyler beat you out, but that's good idea.
Hey, that's probably going to happen a lot.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen. But regardless, it's time to move on.
And then our last matchup in the left conference first round is the entire Three Colors trilogy by Kieslowski, and then Mike Lee's Naked.
Now, let me say this for Mike Lee's Naked. I think that the sheer unpleasantness of this movie, which, to be clear, this is one of the most unpleasant movies I've ever watched.
I literally took a bath after watching it.
I do think that this movie contains a lot of really compelling stuff. I think David Thewlis in this movie is just an incredible live wire presence that really kind of lifts the movie above just simply like just doldrum, like miserable, slog. And that scene with him and the security guard is, I think, really incredible. I was thinking about that the other day. And there is good stuff in it. And, well, I mean, it is a well-made movie. It's very confident. It's very assured in, like, what it's trying to do. That said, it is not fun to watch at all. And it is just the sheer, like, there's just so much in it that is just so thoroughly, almost distasteful.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Like, the more I think about this movie, the more I really do not like it. Like, I don't think it's a good movie anymore.
Oh, interesting.
I think its depiction of rape and relationships is abhorrent. I think it does far more to normalize these horrible people than to analyze them. I think, like, its depiction of this closed world is just horribly abusive, and I don't think it quite understands the subtext of all your men are rapists and all your women think it's okay.
Well,
I don't think the movie quite understands that in a way that would make it a rewarding and thematic watch. Like, I don't think the unpleasantness is as planned and as intentional as you think it is.
Well,
I do think, like, this movie is, like, deeply, deeply problematic in many ways, and I can't quite say it's well constructed because I hate David Thewlis, and I don't think the movie really wants me to hate him the way I do.
Well, I don't know. I don't think the movie's like.
It doesn't like David Thewlis.
No. It is not celebrating him in any way.
No.
But
I think it normalizes him.
I don't know. Honestly, I would say this movie just has like a contempt for all its characters, which in a way just kind of makes it even more unpleasant to watch. Like, I don't know. I think Mike Leigh is kind of treating all these characters with just kind of a weird sort of just distance and like just kind of almost mockingly, condescending air.
I'm not here to say that, like, Mike Leigh wants us to like any of them. I think you're right. Like, that's Mike Leigh's intention. But I also think it's also kind of a failure on that front because I don't really read that from it. I kind of read this as like a closed environment that isn't as that the movie doesn't portray as the most hateable thing in the world, even when it is. And I think that is somewhat abhorrent. It's not the worst film I've ever seen. It's not the most problematic film I've ever seen. I think I've actually seen more unpleasant films because I've actually watched Nazi propaganda.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's worth a watch for really anyone.
Okay. Well, I might disagree with you, but certainly it is not for the faint of heart.
I think your reading is perfectly valid. I'm not angry with you liking this movie.
I'm not prepared to say I like it, but it's certainly I think there is some merit to it. But I mean, what? It's gonna hold the candle to the entire Three Colors trilogy? Are you fucking kidding me?
Fuck no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Write this shit in.
All right. That was easy.
All right. So, now we move on to the right conference, only because it's on the right side of the page, with our first match. David Cronenberg's The Fly up against Inception.
Inception's terrible.
Well,
I think it's the worst Christopher Nolan movie.
Whoa, okay, that is some bold talk.
Now that's a hot take.
You're gonna say Inception is worse than The Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar.
Okay, I laughed the fuck through Dark Knight Rises, and Interstellar gave me pretty things to look at. Those are two things Inception didn't do. I genuinely do think this is his worst movie. so turgid and just so full of itself, and the characters are just so bland and lifeless. Like, this is exposition, the movie.
Well, yes, that is true. But I do think that he dresses up the exposition in a way that makes it entertaining enough. I'm not going to waste too much breath.
I do agree.
I'm not going to waste too much breath defending this movie.
No, should you?
Because I do think The Fly is certainly better. But I just... Inception has an emotional kind of coherence to it that Christopher Nolan doesn't often get to.
Yeah.
There's an attempt at that. I'll give you that.
Well,
I think that wife is just not a character.
No. And that is sort of part of the text of the movie. I'm not saying that's an excuse necessarily, but he does kind of build that in to the structure and to the, you know.
Oh, I'll agree with that. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen.
Jesus. I don't know.
I think this is the movie I think of when I think I don't like Christopher Nolan. Like, this is it.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth noting that I watched this movie, you know, when we were gearing up for the Nolan episode of the podcast. I kind of went on a mini Nolan binge with my friends, and there's one line from this movie that has become kind of a meme within my social group that as an illustration of Christopher Nolan's kind of skill for writing dialogue or lack thereof, which is when Tom Berenger says, I don't know, some meaningful combination of numbers based on your experiences with Maurice. When that line came up when we were watching it, we all just burst out laughing.
Was that the moment where you said, "Oh, this is the movie I'm watching," or was it far before that?
Well, the whole thing. Because again, at one point, this was one of my favorite movies ever, and I
don't think. And I'm not going to criticize like a young film student you for like thinking this is one of your favorite movies. Look, I think there's a lot of like the film community that went through like the I love Christopher Nolan phase.
Much of the film community is still there, but I think and
they should stop.
The journey of, I think, every film student to some degree is loving Christopher Nolan and then learning to leave Christopher Nolan behind. And I think
I love Dark Knight too. It's fine.
Yeah.
I learned that movie's not the greatest. You can do it too.
Yeah, but I do think that this movie has some merits, but The Fly is a masterpiece of horror.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
It contains many multitudes that Inception is only grasping toward.
Yeah.
But I don't want to leave Inception completely by the wayside.
I do, but I understand why you. I understand your defense. I think there are interesting ideas for ideas. Within it, I think
it's a Inception.
I think a movie about dreams that takes this approach can certainly be done. Not the way like you have to be like bright colors, paprika, and anime insanity. I mean, like in like the sort of dressed down sort of like Hollywood action film approach. I think that can be done. I just think Christopher Nolan can't write dialogue and doesn't understand how humans work. Yeah.
Well, you're not wrong. But I also think Inception is important kind of as a gateway to some kind of weirder and more out there stuff.
I mean, if you use Christopher Nolan as a gateway, there are many worse things to be a gateway.
Yeah.
I don't think Christopher Nolan's a misogynist. So.
Yeah. All right. So that wraps that one up. That's The Fly taking that one.
Oh yeah.
Next matchup. Palin Pressburger's The Red Shoes versus John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China.
I've not seen either of these movies, so
yeah.
Pull it out amongst
you and me.
Well,
I had some issues with Big Trouble in Little China, though I still understand why you think it's a delightful movie. I understand why what someone see the pieces of it and say I love this buffoon American running through this sort of Asiatic culture. I love how you can love the action scenes and so forth. I kind of found it. I found it annoying in ways it didn't intend to be.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. This movie to me was just so delightful, and it's just a rollicking good time, and a great journey through it. Just a bizarre mashup of so many different worlds and ideas.
Oh, certainly.
That just meant so much to me. I think that this movie just has so many great pleasures to be mined, and the way that it kind of subverts the action hero tropes and the just builds such a unique thing and a unique vision. I just think that there's so much.
I think that starts off as a clever subversion, but then sort of indulge. I think for my taste, it just indulges that a bit too much, and just sort of becomes like, God, get me away from this fucking American. just like let me be with like let this be the Hong Kong action movie this kind of is.
Mm.
That's my, and I understand like why you have big dumb American to be like action hero subversion. I just kind of I think just what they were selling, what they were kind of mocking was just kind of what I wanted, which was a Hong Kong action movie. But like that's mine, and I don't really have any like substantial sort of like this movie is like deeply troubling or deeply problematic in any ways. I do agree with like your analysis of it. I just didn't really find it nearly as delightful.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it comes down to just kind of a sheer entertainment level in a lot of ways with this one.
And this is an entertainment movie, more so than a lot of the movies on this list.
Certainly. But I mean, Red Shoes has all that and more.
It's the red fucking shoes.
Much as I love Big Trouble in Little China, I mean, just the Red Shoes is just, it's a powerhouse, and
I just think of Anton Walbrook with his cigarette and Technicolor, and I just think like, that's one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah. All right, so that's that. Next matchup. Now, this is going to be interesting.
We have a Banksy documentary going up against a Seishun Suzuki film.
Good lord. Exit through the gift shop.
Kill is one of the most batshit crazy things I've ever seen, and I love.
Oh my god.
I
fucking love Brandon to Kill. This movie.
That movie, like, the more I think about it, the more like, man, that movie's just gorgeous and like wonderful and just like confounding in the most wonderful way. I think, whereas like the movie kind of just doesn't want you to understand everything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you can follow the plot if you're trying to.
Oh,
but,
it's not Tokyo Drifters.
Yeah. But. Like, yeah, no, Tokyo Drifter, man, I still don't know what happened in that movie, but like,
I just see Technicolor and that's it.
But Brandon to Kill just, it you can follow it, but the logic of it is just kind of not there. It just flows from one thing to the next without concern for any kind of rhyme or reason, but it all totally works just as a cohesive whole, at least for me.
Yeah. Absolutely, yes.
Oh yeah, Brandon the Kill was like a super rewarding, super entertaining watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I still prefer Exit to the Gift Shop. I think Exit Through the Gift Shop is one of the greatest documentaries ever made, and like as much as I really like Brandon the Kill, I don't think it can match perfection.
Well, I do love Exit Through the Gift Shop, but I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Brandon to Kill is just a movie that I just is always in the back of my mind, and I don't know. I read you're kind of the tie-breaking vote here.
Yeah. While Exit Through the Gift Shop has some nice thematic resonance, I will say that there is a brain cell in the back of my brain, in the back of my head, that's just charred from watching Brandon to Kill. And just the memory of me just like watching the just sheer insanity of violence, just manifesting in something like God.
I concede. If any movie is going to go past me, Brandon the Kill is one I'm going to allow to happen. But are we ready to move on to The Thing and Dogtooth?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's Dogtooth?
So the strangest movie I've ever seen.
Dogtooth, is super bizarre. Just I think that Out of the two Yorgos Lanthimos movies I've seen, this is my preferred
Yeah,
version.
yeah. Well, I just think the Lobster, just once it gets in the second half, it just kind of loses its way.
Yeah. Dogtooth, it I think maybe it can kind of get lost in the weeds just of its own kind of strangeness and like just kind of
Yeah.
super just its own like kind of nihilistic view of the world.
I'm not entirely sure what we're supposed to read in its nihilism at times.
Yeah.
And like, which is why like I'm just so like confused by it, because like sometimes like nihilism for nihilism's sakes can be disastrous.
Yeah, certainly.
Like sometimes that can just create like an ugly, punishing movie, and I don't think Dogtooth is that.
No. I don't think it's disastrous. I do think it kind of prevents the movie from being like an all-timer for me.
Yeah. It can be thoroughly unpleasant at times.
Certainly, and I did like it quite a bit, but
I like it too.
It's something about it. Just Yorgos Lanthimos has a way of just kind of keeping you at arm's length. In a way that
I can't quite call that a pejorative, because I think that's kind of part of his operating style.
Sure.
But like it does make his films. It's difficult for me to say like I like Dogtooth, and it's how else do you interact with movies when you can't even say like whether you like them or not.
Yeah. Well, I do like it. I don't love it. I think, but yeah, and it's just there's just something just keeping you perhaps consciously from fully getting into it, but
but it's still really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you have any interest in like this kind of, if you are a masochist, this is the perfect film for you.
So, yeah.
But maybe I would enjoy it. Okay.
But you know what movie I do love is John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, that is. Oh god, it's a great ship in a bottle movie.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful, just kind of sealed off environment that he creates, and just the special effects of it, the whole just kind of air of dread that hangs over the whole thing.
Just wonderful performances, like a great ensemble.
Yeah, an incredible ensemble. Like Kurt Russell, Keith David. Yeah, everybody's doing great work.
I think this is my favorite like Kurt Russell performance.
Yeah, certainly. Do you have anything else to say, Garrett?
I did not see Dogtooth, so I'm going to abstain. Just out of fairness.
But The Thing wins 2-0 here, in this sort of truncated.
All right, so we are halfway through.
Oh boy.
Ooh, goody.
You're not, but we get into some difficult stuff. So let's go to the left conference. The first of the second round matches, the life and death of Colonel Blimp, number 1 seed, versus number 5 seed Paprika.
This is what I feared. Because God, I adore Paprika, but it's the life and death of Colonel Blimp.
I mean, yeah, that's just what's gonna happen here. Like, it's the life and death of fucking Colonel Blimp. Like, how do you? How do you go up against that?
As much as I adore Paprika from beginning to end, I just don't think it has a scene quite on parallel with you mock my mustache, but you don't know why I grew it. I just don't know like what scene in Paprika matches that beginning. And like when I'm there, I'm just kind of like, oh, I just got to give it.
Yeah, no, it's.
I will say, yeah, for as much as Paprika is maybe more visually appealing because it's animated, perhaps.
It's a little bit more colorful.
It's more colorful and it's more animated. I struggle to find just like the brevity and the tour de force of the story behind the movie. That is the recently watched The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah, I think as far as visuals are concerned, because these are both like films that are colorful per se.
Sure. Yeah.
The term Technicolor for each of them. But they're colorful in extremely different ways. Like all like the Archers films are very dirty in a certain way. For as colorful and as like bursting off the screen as they can be, they can also be like gritty and like it feels like these places have existed for centuries at times. And that is and Paprika is just so like digital like animation, just like cleanliness all through, which is kind of like what like dominates Japanese animation now, and honestly kind of like animation in general, which is like super clean, sort of like bright colors.
Mm-hmm.
God, it kills me to get rid of Paprika, but I think we have to give it Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah. It's just the way it has to be.
That was actually kind of easy. All right.
It's the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, man. It's just what's gonna happen.
Please don't make that a panacea. Please don't.
Next
now,
up.
number 3, After Hours, versus number 2, the entire Three Colors trilogy.
God. I mean...
I have to go with the Three Colors trilogy here, but I do feel bad knocking off After Hours.
This is where we have to make the tough choices, and this is it. I mean, After Hours, I just think is just an incredible, just rollicking, just, masterfully constructed, just acid trip of a movie.
Yeah.
But just the Three Colors, I mean, it's a little unfair putting the entire trilogy here.
Here's the thing about it, as far as, like, the Three Colors trilogy is about East meets West, Poland is France, France is Poland, like these broad geopolitical themes, whereas After Hours is a New York movie. And it kind of can't help but like just pale in comparison.
Yeah.
Like even if you took like one of the Three Colors trilogy and put it against After Hours, I think I'd still be saying the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even White, which is kind of my least favorite of the three, is like still just an incredibly constructed, just zany, and politically resonant and emotionally resonant, humanistic movie.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Mr. Scorsese.
Yeah. Well, hey, Scorsese, he's our greatest living filmmaker, and he'll always have that. So until he dies. Three Colors all the way for me.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So 3-0 again. All right. So now we go to the right conference with a match that you two will have to decide. It is The Fly up against the Red Shoes.
I'm picking the Red Shoes on this one.
Oh shit! I wanted The Fly.
Oh no!
Shit, because here's the thing about part of my issue with the Red Shoes, if there is an issue to be had, is that like. It is one of those movies where its pleasures are kind of purely technical. It's like as fascinating as Anton Walbrook is, and like some of these things. But I think like part of what makes that movie so wonderful is it just purely from a technical standpoint, just the gorgeous visuals, just like the wonderful dance sequences, like these things that on their own shouldn't have thematic meaning, but do via incredible filmmaking. Which actually which I think actually actually maybe. Let me think about this a bit more, because that actually makes it kind of comparable to The Fly in a certain way. Because part of what makes The Fly so wonderful is just like the wonderful technicals and just how sometimes they just take over the film.
Yeah, well, I don't think the Red Shoes is like purely technical pleasures at all.
I don't think that either, which is kind of why I'm kind of stopping myself here.
Yeah, no, I think that there's an incredible richness to these characters, particularly like the central trio with Anton Walbrook and the composer and the lead dancer, whose name I am forgetting. But I think the entire back half of the movie is just like kind of devoted to like the kind of triangle between those three characters. And also it's just the quintessential like backstage drama. Like I think that the seeing all these characters like working to put this ballet together and get it up on the stage, like I think that's wondrous. And the dance sequence is just a masterpiece of technical filmmaking, yes, but also just beautiful, all the beautiful imagery they can fit up on the screen at once.
Yeah, you're selling me. I'm gonna have to go with the Red Shoes.
Yes.
I can't bet against Powell and Pressburger.
Victory.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so sorry, Garrett, but it's what we got. So we have the Red Shoes and that one. Next, Branded to Kill versus The Thing. Oh, this is hard for me.
I'm gonna go with Branded to Kill.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Branded to Kill. I remember far more from Branded to Kill than I do The Thing.
Wow. Wow. Okay, that wasn't hard for either of you.
I actually remember more of The Thing, but I remember enjoying Branded to Kill a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Just like getting a ride.
Branded the
From
Kill like
Branded
has
Kill.
me in a certain position where like I'm just it's one of my favorite positions to be with some movies where I'm just kind of struggling what to say about it,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I know that there's so much to be said.
Yeah.
In a way that like The Thing for like and The Thing is a wonderfully simple movie.
Uh-huh.
That I think when you compare it to something like Branded to Kill, that simplicity kind of shows itself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to fight against that. I mean, these movies, this is going to sound weird to say, but these movies kind of scratch like a similar itch for me. In some ways, I think just kind of that they're wonderfully artfully made movies that are also just riotously entertaining.
Yeah, you're right.
But I'm not going to argue against Branded to Kill. I think that movie, just the multifaceted kind of layers to the movie. I think you're right. The Thing is an excellent like simple story and simple setup, like beautifully executed. But Branded to Kill has just so much going on. Like it's subverting tropes of film noir. It's like doing cartoon logic in a live action world. It's sending
it's
up
one of the most gorgeous things you've ever seen.
Sending up the Yakuza movie in an incredible comedic way, and yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, I think so I'm surprised. I'm as okay with it. When I first looked at this list, I didn't think I would have thought I would have picked The Thing, but yeah, Branded the Kill. It's a movie.
Yeah,
it's a movie.
I'm kind of surprised by how much you're writing for it, John. Because as I remember, you were just kind of coming out of it being like, "What the fuck is this movie?"
Oh, I still am in some ways, but like I think it's kind of a pure memory thing at this point. Like Branded the Kill can't do anything but like lodge itself in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And just sort of be this thing that's gnawing at you, and and there are just scenes in it that are just utterly wonderful as well. Like the scene where he's like in like the ring is he getting shot at?
Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah. He's getting shot at, and it's like
that's just like that's a scene I can't get out of my head, and that's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I don't think The Thing for all its greatness, I don't think The Thing can match that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly it breaks my heart to lose The Thing, but you got to do what you got to do. So, all right, we're down to the final four.
Out of the final four, let's go to the left conference finale, pinning up the life and death of Colonel Blimp and the entire Three Colors trilogy.
Oh,
this is so hard.
Oh, this is woof. I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
You know what? I think thematically, the power of three wins out. I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the power of three wins out. Because as good as Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is, there were times when I was watching it going, is this a British... This almost feels like a British propaganda film a little bit.
I disagree with that, though I can understand why one would think that.
Okay.
Here's the thing about it. I'm going to say this. I don't think there was ever a point in the Three Colors trilogy where I was nearly as glued to the screen as I was with the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Interesting.
For as masterful as it was, I think like the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp held my attention far better than this, and also I think also just kind of made me think a bit more.
Yeah.
Like in some ways, like the Three Colors trilogy, I don't want to call these things surface movies, but kind of a lot of what they are is kind of up there to be discussed right on the surface level.
That's
sure.
That's true in a sense.
In a certain regard, there's certain things like there's a shitload of subtext in those movies.
Oh yeah.
But I think there is just like and there's something to be said like the power of three against one.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like Colonel Blimp has a thematic richness that I don't think is quite in any of these, especially like when you have a movie like White in there, where like Carol is kind of cartoon character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in a really interesting and fascinating way, but he's still a cartoon character. I don't think there is like anyone is like richly rendered as like Anton Walbrook or Candy.
I mean,
but then I remember Blue exists. And shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
It's really hard.
I think the Three Colors, they're all just like beautifully made, like artful movies.
Mm-hmm.
And,
they're all art house films through and through.
Yeah. They're great works of art. But like, I don't know, man. Like Life and Death of Colonel Blimp has all that kind of artfulness and still manages to work in like incredible depth of character and incredible like
I
so
think that's
many
kind of where I am.
big themes. It's kind of a matter of like what you want to choose.
It feels a bit more human. I think maybe that's where I'm
Well,
going. I think it just feels a little bit more human.
They're both very, very, very
Yeah.
human works. I think.
Yeah. Red feels especially more human because it especially feels because you have this more closeness with with that, which I will say, granted, blue sort of has this distance.
Yeah, maybe
out a little bit.
God, shit, this is. I am going to put in the life and death of Colonel Blimp.
I'm going to put in the entire Three Colors trilogy.
Okay, Tyler, this is up to you.
God, this is
the
just
fate of the podcast rests in your hands.
Oh man, this is a real Sophie's. This is a real Sophie's choice for me.
This
but
is a worst case scenario.
I guess I think I'm gonna go with Colonel Blimp. It's a tough. Believe me, this is one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make. But I'm going Colonel Blimp. I just think that movie has so much on its mind, and it and I say this as like the Three Colors trilogy, like, Three Colors Red, I think is a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite things ever.
I think White's one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen.
But I just think you just can't quite match Colonel Blimp.
So
that was hard, but I just All right.
You made a good fucking bracket.
Well, we'll find out.
Made it too good. Okay. What's up next?
Next, the Red Shoes up against Brandon to Kill.
Oh fuck! This might happen. Like my worst nightmare might happen when we get the Red Shoes versus Colonel Blimp.
Okay, I can't make a decision on this, so. But I will put in a good name for Brandon to Kill.
I'm going with the Red Shoes.
Oh.
I think this is a kind of easy one for me.
Interesting.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting because I just sung the praises of the Red Shoes so hard to like get you to vote for it, and I don't know, man. I mean, Brandon...
I don't know. Partially, like this part of the bracket is kind of like marriages of convenience per se, because like I think Brandon the Kill would only move on when compared to something like The Thing. Like if you had like if there was a fucking if there was a goddamn Carol Reed movie in there somewhere, like I don't think Brandon the Kill would be anywhere near that. Nearby.
I mean, it almost kind of feels like a cop out, but like, I kind of have to go with the Red Shoes. I mean, I just can't deny it. It's such an undeniable force of a movie.
The Red Shoes is satisfying in a way that Brandon the Kill can never. Partially out of design.
I have to kind of agree with that.
That seems fair. Okay.
Yeah, because like Brandon the Kill is just so batshit, and foreign in a way that is really foreign. Not even foreign insofar as that like it's part of foreign cinema, but foreign insofar as like you're not quite sure what these characters are, what they're going to do, what they even want to do.
Yeah.
In a way where it's like there's just such a wonderful clarity over character in the Red Shoes.
Right. Yeah. No, Red Shoes, like Brandon to Kill is like the most delicious like snack of all time. Like the most an incredible like. Light meal, but Red Shoes is like a feast, and I
agree with that.
I can't deny that. So it all comes down to what we all feared: the Red Shoes.
The final is actually between Powell and Pressburger. So the final, I think we kind of saw this coming. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp versus the Red Shoes. I'm going to put in a good word for the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
This is actually probably the easiest one. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah. I mean, I love the Red Shoes, and it really it means a lot to me as like just kind of the artistry and coming from that kind of artistic world, like all the theater I did in high school. Like I think Red Shoes captures that atmosphere beautifully.
Yeah.
But Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
43 years of European history.
Yeah, I just, yeah.
There we are.
So that just, I mean, I think that just totally encapsulates like the lesson of Volume 2 of the podcast, which is fucking Powell and Pressburger should be talked about way more.
God, I fucking wish we could put a matter of life and death on here.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to see. I need to see a Canterbury Tale. I need to see. God, I'm.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
I don't think this is a surprise in any way, but
No, this is kind of what we expected, but I think the road we took to here had a lot of bumps.
Yeah.
I did not expect. I sort of expected The Fly to be in that, but it wasn't. I was really surprised how far Braided to Kill went. I was shocked.
Yeah, I think the power of Palin Pressburger overpowered Cronenberg.
Yeah.
And three pan-European movies.
Yeah. That about does it. I mean, yep. So, that's it that closes the book on volume 2 of the Hack Fraud Show.
We just took 2 hours to say the Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is the best movie we've seen on the podcast.
Twice over, I might add.
Yeah.
But what can you do?
Maybe 3 times over.
Yeah, almost 3 times over.
I mean, listen, to all of you out there, like, thank you all for coming on this journey with us. And if you take nothing else away from this, just go watch The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp over and over again.
Watch any Palin Pressburger movie.
Yeah. And
just like fucking like do like Russian roulette but with Palin Pressburger movies.
And and watch Branded to Kill. Watch the Three Colors trilogy. Just
watch pretty much all of these other than Inception and The Fountain.
Even those I think you should watch. Like cinema, you should explore as much cinema as you possibly can. That is what we strive to do. That is our mission.
Naked and find out what your comfort zone is.
Yeah, for sure. Reed, I don't think I think it's well beyond your comfort zone, but
naked is one of those things that like really things like what are my values in a way that I don't think any other movie has. And I think partially like me reiterating this, I'm not gonna get back on Naked.
Let's not. All right. I think we're pretty much out of time, so we'll save what we've been watching for next week. But what do we want to do next time?
What do we want to start out with Volume 3 with? What do we want to start out?
There are Palin Pressburger films we haven't seen.
That's true. There are.
You're absolutely right.
I think
we also talked about Perfect Blue.
Ooh.
Perfect Blue?
Perfect Blue, another Satoshi Kon film. I'm down with that.
Okay.
We can do Perfect Blue, and then there's a Palin Pressburger movie. It's kind of the last one of like the ones that people tend to bring up a lot, like before you kind of get into their lesser known sort of stuff, which I'm sure is still great, but kind of their last like all-time classic that people like to bring up is called I Know Where I'm Going.
I Know Where I'm Going.
Starring Roger Livesey, Colonel Blimp himself.
Yep.
And Wendy
Most
Hiller.
Delightful actors ever.
Yep. And
I don't see Anton Walbrook.
No, I don't think he's in this one.
Interesting.
But it is 88 minutes, so
ooh, goody.
That's always nice.
So I think Perfect Blue is only like 90 minutes of that.
Okay, good. Also, I'm scrolling through the Wikipedia page here. Apparently, Martin Scorsese said of this movie, "I reached the point of thinking there were no more masterpieces to discover until I saw I Know Where I'm Going."
There we are.
All right. It's Scorsese endorsed, so we have to do it.
I've heard Perfect Blue is kind of the darkest of the Satoshi Kon films.
Oh, interesting.
Oh. Have you ever seen Tokyo Godfathers?
No, I forgot about that movie. I'm gonna have to see
Tokyo
that. Tokyo
Godfathers is really, really interesting, and also kind of, I think one of his more Hollywood films because Millennium Actress just gets weird at times.
Yeah, I love that movie too.
And we saw that. Yeah,
and also, but I think you guys should watch like Tokyo Godfathers if you just need more Satoshi Kon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like he only made like 4 films, didn't he?
Yeah, 4 feature films.
I think one of the most tragic deaths I've come across in film world.
Yeah. All right. Well, Perfect Blue and I Know Where I'm Going coming your way next time.
2 masters, 2 different worlds, 1 podcast.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good way to kind of segue into the next volume, kind of returning to 2 masters that we've kind of discovered through the podcast.
Yeah, that's something I'm more than happy to do. So here we are.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends, for joining us for this clusterfuck.
Yes, thank you all
Yes,
for
thank you.
continuing to go through this with us. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time, and thanks for 2 years, 100 episodes of this.
Yes.
Who would have thought we'd make
Yes,
it this
thank you.
far?
Brenna, do you think you'll listen to this episode?
I just did.
Well, did you like it?
I don't know. I was half asleep.
Well, I see. I see.
Come on, I
Cool.
never watched those movies.
You can still be a part of like a good filmic discourse. I'm not gonna have this fight.
I saw Inception. That's it.
Is it terrible?
It was a good. It like had a good idea. But like they just. I also
Christopher Nolan isn't a good filmmaker. Exactly.
It was a decent idea. I will give you that.
Paprika came out 4 years earlier.
Okay. Alright, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
I'm gonna show you more Pal and Pressburger movies. Good. You're gonna like them. They're really good. Excellent.